Very good. Yeah. So we're recording right now. Greg, thanks for your time. I know you've done a few recordings with Ned Dennison and Steve Miniatunis.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, there's so much content on swimming stuff, which is amazing. Um, I wanted to, I mean, everybody knows about your swimming records, right? You're such a calm person. You never claim to be a superstar. But I read something from one of your posts recently, and it touched a chord in my heart. And I want to talk to you about that. Your best friend,
Yeah.
Stephen
Yeah.
Gueth.
Stephen Gueth. Yeah.
How do you say his last name?
Gueth.
Stephen Gueth.
Yeah.
I was reading it again this morning. Remember to take care of your goodness.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can
Yeah.
you tell me
That was
more
a great
about
quote
that?
Well, Stephen was a guy who was grounded in also a very calm demeanor. And we grew up in Catholic school, and we sort of grew up with this sort of philosophy of taking care of other people. And Stephen was very much like that. He sort of found that his philosophy in life was more associated with Buddhism, and that's kind of how he conducted himself. But Stephen was always very down to earth, and he had a lot of he looked after a lot of people in a lot of different circumstances, and including some traumatic type of stuff that happened. And I think over the years, at different times when I was expressing some of the hardships that I had dealt with, that was what he said, and it always stuck with me because it's such great advice in terms of self-care and trying to make sure that, okay, you're down, things bad are happening to you, don't transmit that to the rest of the world. Make sure you're taking care of what you do for other people at the same time, so that you're not just transmitting negativity and bad thoughts. Stay true to the best nature that you can put forward for people. So that was see, I have to say, Stephen was probably the only guy in my entire life that he never let me down once on anything. He was always there for me when I needed him, and always a steadfast friend over the years and over the distance, because he lived in British Columbia for many years while I lived in Ontario. But we could always get in touch with each other and pick up from where we left off.
It's awesome. Also a swimmer.
Yeah, we swam together in Aquajets, which was our local club here in Cambridge. Mm-hmm. And as we got into our teens and later teens, Stephen stopped swimming, but he kind of picked it up again when he went to university, and he swam at McMaster. And then I think he gravitated over to their water polo team as well. But that's where we spent a lot of time swimming together in the morning, and then we would trek from morning workout probably about 2 or 3 kilometers to our school, which was a fair distance away. And this is a time when kids got to school with bipedal motion, not parents dropping them off. So
uphill both the ways.
Yeah, that's right. Winter and in rain. Yes.
Winter and in rain. Yeah. Very good. Beautiful. Yeah. I know you've been in, every time I meet you or I have a conversation with you, you have such a calm personality and demeanor, and our conversations, your conversations are very well thought of. You don't say anything loosely. It's hard to imagine what kind of personality do you have when you're racing, when you're in the water. How do you approach that just before the race? Are there any nerves? It's just that I'm trying to, okay, hey, like, how does Greg race? Where does he pick up that? Like, you use the word dropping the hammer.
Oh,
Where does
yeah,
the
yeah.
hammer, where do you keep that hammer?
Well, the races, all the races that I did, because of the length and duration of them, you really have to be prepared mentally well in advance and accept a couple of things. That it's going to be a long race. It's going to be a hard race. There's going to be a lot of pain involved, and you have to accept that's part of the equation before you begin. And once you accept that, for me anyway, it was a lot easier to approach the race. I felt often a lot of anxiety and anxiousness before a race, and I just did my best to lay down, relax, do whatever I needed to do, and recognize that because it's the duration of a long race, the race isn't won in the first hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. It's won much further down in the in the competition, and I learned that the hard way because I had a few instances where I did some races that I really put way too much energy out front, and that makes it hurt even more on the back end. And so I went through a process of a lot of learning and a lot of failures to come up with a strategy that I applied successfully a lot later on in my career in the second half of open water swimmings that I did.
That's, I mean, I still, I mean, I haven't raced as much as you because my swimming was primarily to get me out of trouble. So I swam through university just to keep my scholarship and my grades up. And I was like a fair weather swimmer. I would race couple of races just so that, okay, I can keep my scholarship, and I also had to keep up my grades. And that was a big focus for us growing in India.
Now, let me interject and ask you, how is swimming keeping up your grades? Because often people will think of them as competing priorities, and perhaps, as one goes up, the other goes down. How did you manage
exactly that? So that's why I had to be very careful, and I just did like the first season of my races where I could qualify and keep my scholarships, and then I scaled back swimming and focused on school.
Okay.
And also, this is back in early part of 1990s. The education system was very different in India. Right now, things are India is a very different country. So I grew up in a school system, in a college system, university system, where we had like an annual program. So we had like one big exam in the end. So if you screw up, you're done. You had to redo that whole thing again. So, and that includes, so you had to make sure you're attending all the classes, you're getting through all your. I come from the science track, very similar to you. So you had to get through your labs and theory and everything, right? Yeah, you can't miss lab and just do well in theory.
No.
So how did you manage that? Yeah, you have a degree in pharmacy and competing at a very elite level, at a very demanding level. How did you manage those two?
Well, I had a first go around. I did biochemistry before I went to pharmacy school.
Mm-hmm.
And like my swimming career, I made a lot of mistakes and I had some failures initially. I had some problems adjusting to university workload and dealing with the social aspect of being in university and sort of being on your own to a greater degree. And my first 2 years of school were not spectacular. I had okay grades, but they weren't great. And so there was a lot of learning. I really coasted through high school in some sense that, I was working really hard in the pool. and I kind of did what I needed to do to get through. I'm a reasonably good student, but not outstanding by any stretch. And then, my mom was quite ill with cancer when I started school, and also when I was in high school. And when she passed, I did have that would happen between second and third year of university, my first biochem degree. And in some ways, I didn't have a great support system in place because I was in a different city in a different area of the country. And, I had the typical grief that anyone would have with that kind of loss. And I probably, had a hard time adjusting to both the academic and, sports schedule of swimming. But I think as time went on and I went into pharmacy school, I had learned a lot of lessons about organization and how to study effectively and how to minimize the social things. Still be social, but not let that interfere with the priorities. And, planning the day ahead, getting your meals together the night before, having everything packed the night before, so you just wake up, roll out of bed and go. And being efficient during the day, that if you have a break of an hour, then you crack the book for whatever's coming up and not lose any of that time. So I think I got a lot better as time went on with that. Another thing I did in pharmacy school is I had the good fortune when I was at University of British Columbia to be able to train with the UBC swim team.
Mm-hmm.
And the coach there, Tom Johnson, allowed me to do that. I think it was in his best interest too, because, I was, I think, pretty good in terms of motivating some of his distance guys and training together, and both parties having a benefit from that. And what I did was, because the team was so large, they actually split the evening workout into two sessions. One was at 2:30, the other one was at 5:30. So depending on my schedule with labs and so forth, I could actually attend that earlier workout. And then by, like 5:30 or 6, I'm back home and I can refuel, eat, and then get the studying in that I needed to get in. So that was a big help as well.
You mentioned support system. Like, how did you figure out, okay, hey, I need this support system? And what was it that, simple things that helped you mature as a university kid to say, hey, I need help? Was there any specific individual to help you with that, or how did that level of maturity come in? Yeah.
I think my circle of support really at the time was my girlfriend, and I think there were a couple of families in the swim team, in the swim community, that were very extremely generous with their time and their inclusion of me in terms of inviting me to a family dinner. And so the Wecken family, I swam with Suzanne Wecken, who was a great backstroker for Canada, and she went to the World Championships in 91, and she was 10th overall. She got a second swim. I was really proud of Suzanne's accomplishment. And her mom and dad, Tim and Colleen, were really fantastic to me for helping me. And then the Lidke family, Dorothy and Werner Lidke, I swam with their daughter, Corinne. Corinne was a great freestyler, and she went to the World Championships for open water swimming the same time I did in 91. And she came 6th or 7th overall. And I mean, that was one of Canada's best results for everyone. And I was really proud of Corinne's achievements at World Championships. And her family were extremely generous to me and loving. And, I think that formed the core of my support system. In the 80s and 90s, it's not like it is now, right? there was no like, we didn't have any special trainers at the swim team. It was, you know, you have a medical problem, you know, go to your doctor and fix it. And, you know, it's, all these complementary therapies, they didn't really exist. And so, you know, unfortunately for a lot of swimmers, it was kind of, you know, career ending for some people in a different situation. Like, for instance, today they may have been more successful, but I was, I think, also fortunate that over the years I didn't develop any really chronic injuries until, you know, the very end of my career, and I was just lucky. A lot of people swimmers get shoulder problems, and you know, I had some shoulder problems from overworking, but nothing that was career ending until kind of much later on in my career. So I think I was just fortunate, and I had some key people around me who were just generous and loving, and that got me through. You know, I also had a huge supporter in my oldest brother, Anthony, who was able to support me at a distance. You know, we kept in touch by phone and through writing. I mean, this is like pre-adoption of the internet, so there's no FaceTime, and you know, air travel was extremely expensive. So you know, choosing to visit home was a big decision, and you know, it's for better or worse, that's the way it was for me. And I think, you know, my experiences as a teenager, I think I probably somebody from the outside would say, well, that guy's pretty resilient. And I think I did carry that through. So I had that, that benefit as well.
Okay. I mean, the phases of support that come to us is so critical, right? Yeah. Like, I mean, people that just interject in your life and make a positive contribution that plays a significant role, like in the very similar to your 25K swim, in the longevity of the life, right?
Yeah, that's a great analogy. That's a wonderful way to frame it and look at it. You know, I had a very special coach when I was young. I swam with him for 2 years in Cambridge, and then he took a different job. And then a year later, when I was 16, I moved out to Regina, where he ended up. His name's John P.N. Campbell. John was a great coach, extremely charismatic. He was able to bring out the best in me and help me develop sort of like a work ethic and a mental toughness that allowed me to train the way I trained, and ultimately, you know, be pretty successful in open water swimming. And John was another key supporter that, you know, even after our formal coach swimmer relationship ended and I was swimming in a different city in university, he was always a support, him and his wife Robin. And I would not be able to have an interview and not mention John and what a pillar he was for me, and all the support that he gave me over the years.
Awesome. I was going to ask you about John, but you did mention that I have a similar experience with my coach. Very similarly, like very charismatic, and some of the discipline that he brought into my life. A big chunk of my success, actually, I attribute to time that I've spent in the pool. Things that we don't learn in school.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
For sure. For sure.
And I want to jump into, I know you mentioned a bunch of world champions who actually helped you set a stage during your university years. 1988 Olympic trials, 400 IM. How was that?
Well, in 88, there was actually 2 trials. One was in late May, early June, and then there was a second trials in the end of August, because there was still time for people to hit the Olympic standards, and so Swim Canada wisely gave an opportunity for people to again try for that team. I think my best result in the first one was 5th in the 1500, and that was the summer actually my mom passed, and she passed very quickly after the first trials in June, and so I traveled from Victoria back to Cambridge, and lived with my dad and my brothers, and it was a very, as you can imagine, very difficult time. And I swam with the club in Brantford, and Brantford was coached by this fellow Mark Fellner. And there's this I don't know, this Tolstoy said, his famous novel, it was the worst, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Maybe I've got that backwards. and really that summer was like that for me, because I was dealing with the grief and the loss of my mom. But this group of swimmers and Mark, they were really fantastic to me. And that group of swimmers, they were all young. I think I was there's only one other guy who was university age, and everyone else was, grade 11, grade 12. But from that group of swimmers, there were a lot of great, champions that came out of that program. And again, it was a situation where they showed me a lot of kindness and accepting me into their training group. And, it was a strange time because I was working construction during the day in Cambridge. So I do my workout in Brantford, drive to Cambridge, was about half an hour drive, work all day in the sun, and then go back to Brantford in the evening for a workout. So I don't know if that was for me or against me, but at the end of that summer, when I went to Olympic trials in the end of August, it was also the Canadian National Championships. I probably had the best pool meet of my life, and not so much in 1500, but in all the other events I swam, those were the best times that I ever did as a pool swimmer, and the 400 IM was one of them. And I had worked really hard on my breaststroke with Mark. Mark had given me, because that was the weakest leg for me. My fly was okay. My backstroke was okay. My breaststroke had always been terrible. I had, I don't know why, genetically or whatever, not a great breaststroker. I think my legs are too short. But anyway, my freestyle was pretty good, but we put a lot of work into improving my breaststroke. And then, at night I swam, I went 429. So I broke 430 barrier, which was a big deal for me because I had sat at like 432, 433 for a long time. And I was really pleased with that swim, but it wasn't good enough for an Olympic team. And still, it was a really good meet. I got chosen to be on this sort of Olympic B team, and we went to Moscow, and it was supposed to be a tri-meet between Russia, England, and Canada, and I think England didn't come for whatever reason. It was a great experience seeing Soviet Russia before fully changed, and because I swam pretty much on par at that meet with my previous experiences, so it was good.
I want to talk about three things, but one was like when we were growing up, there was no concept of mental health. You mentioned the word resilience. Like, how did we do it? How did you do it?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Growing up in my family, like typical parents, Canadian parents of that era, they were a little bit hands off in some ways. I didn't have very many heart-to-heart talks ever with either of my parents until, I certainly did with my dad as an adult, but not when I was younger. And I think I think some people just have an innate resilience that's built into them, or it's part of a coping mechanism to deal with other things. I don't know. It's hard to put a finger on it. I'm not quite sure how to answer that question.
Okay. I mean, yeah, like mental health is such a complicated thing. Yeah, I can't even. I can't even understand that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, you think of all the resources that we have nowadays and how much better it's recognized, and still it's a huge problem. Like we're all coping with the way society's changing and technology and everything else. And I think probably part of it for me was being involved in a steady group of chums and people who were like-minded.
Yes.
And you had sort of, maybe didn't have heart-to-heart talks with everyone about your problems, but you recognize that all those people who are in your swim club or in your class, they are all sort of dealing with the same stuff. And again, when I moved to Regina and swam with that group there, I was accepted, and I think that had a large part in helping to develop resilience going forward, was having the acknowledgement that other people are going through what you're going through. And but I mean, you're right, it was not, mental health wasn't recognized the way it is now.
Yeah. And you mentioned construction job. So something that hit me was, I think probably that was like cross training for you.
Yeah, maybe it was in many ways. You're just dealing with the heat and the work, and then coming back and swimming a night workout. And I think it was a form of very non-specific and general cross training. Sure.
And you mentioned breaststroke. I have similar experience. Breaststroke is not my favorite stroke, but I'm going to mention something, and I don't know how the rest of the world, once this is published, will take this comment. So we lived in California, and I was actually this person was on Chad Hundaby's record-breaking English Channel swim. Okay, I forget his name. This conversation is from 2002 or 2003. So we were in a small gathering, and we were all introducing ourselves. So I told this man that, okay, hey, about my swimming things, and a couple of swimmers, me and another person. Yeah. So we mentioned we don't like breaststroke. It's not our favorite stroke. So he goes on the podium and he's introducing us. So Madhu and his last name is Walker. Okay. So it says that, okay, these guys prefer their breaststrokes outside the pool.
Well, that's a cheeky remark. Probably wouldn't go down so well in 2024, but
so it looks like you belong to the same club.
Yeah. I'll tell you a story about how bad I was as a breaststroker. When I was young, we went to this meet every year called pentathlon. And it was a meet in St. Catharines, and they had 5 events, and you swam all 5 events, and then based on your accumulated time, that's who was the winner, and so on and so forth. I think one of the events was like 800 free and 100 back and like 100 fly and 50 something or other, and then 200 breaststroke. So I did these events, and I was 11 years old. No, beg your pardon. I was 9. I was 9 years old. And, after the first 4 events, excluding the 200 breast, I had this insurmountable lead. There's these kids weren't getting, the guy in second place is not going to catch me. And 200 breast starts, and I get into it, and I I'm doing terrible, but I think it's okay. I'm going to win this. I got such a big lead. I get to the very end of the race. I touch the wall. I go back to my coach, and he says, that was, what were you doing in there? I said, let's do the 200 breast. Didn't you see me? So they announced the winners, and I'm expecting to, they announced third place, and they announced second place, and I'm expecting that the other guy is going to be second because I'm the winner. I had such a big lead. They announced me as second place, so I go up on the podium and I get my prize, which was a small trophy, and then they announced the winner, which is this other guy who had a good breaststroke, and he beat me. And it was this ginormous trophy that they handed him. And as a 9-year-old in the 70s, nowadays every kid gets a trophy, but back then a trophy meant something. More significant to sort of winning and losing. And I was crushed that my poor breaststroke had led to me not winning this gigantic trophy. It was probably 2 feet high. It was so big. And I really took that to heart. And I would try my best in breaststroke, but again, it was Mark Fellner that actually got me to improve my breaststroke as an adult swimmer, as a young man. So I'm still not great at breaststroke, and I still realize that, when I do masters swimming, if I want to do a good I got to put a lot of work into my breaststroke. So anyway, that's my breaststroke story.
Like a powerful long distance freestyler, and then also a strong medley swimmer. How do you balance this?
I think they're very complementary, right? Because they really both those types of events require a lot of fitness. They're both mentally very difficult to do. So in that sense, they're complementary. I think really I spent a lot of time and effort trying to be good at 400 IM, but I was never going to be a truly world-class IMer because of my breaststroke. It wasn't in the cards for me. But at that time, when my formative years, Alex Bowman was ascendant. He was Canada's double Olympic gold medal winner at 84 Olympics in 200 and 400 IM. And for some reason, I had this continued affinity for the IM events. And I think it was because, I really looked up to Alex, and I wanted to emulate Alex in some respects. And, I just didn't have the physicality to be a great IMer because of my poor breaststroke. So
you ended up swimming freestyle, like 1500 and 800 freestyle.
Yeah.
What was the transition to open water swimming? How did that happen?
Well, in the late 80s, I think FINA wanted to start adding an open water event to their regimen of events. And so they decided to go with a 25K. And so I think that was announced in 1989. And my coaches at the time, Ron Jackson and Peter Viggioli at the University of Victoria and Vico Swim Club in Victoria, they said, long distance open water swimming, you have to consider this.
Yeah, but how did you embrace it? 1500 meters and 25 kilometers.
Yeah,
much more pain.
A lot more. In some respects, you can argue that the 1500 is pretty painful, but at least it feels more finite than an open water swim of long duration. It was a process. It was really a process. I didn't know what to expect the first time I did 25K in a race. We agreed that, okay, let's start working towards this. We started doing some longer swims in practice where we only had 2 hours, so we would, fit in a 9K swim, and that would be pretty standard to get that done within the 2 hours. And we did a little bit of open water swimming in Victoria at Elk Lake, which is a, sort of an urban lake there that rowers also use. And I would say is primarily a lake for rowers and the population to enjoy, but we would get in there and do our open water swims. And I didn't really know what to expect when I went to the Canadian trials for that first World Championships. The Canadian trials were in 1990, and I didn't know how it was going to go. I just showed up. There were a few other guys who were pretty accomplished 1500 guys there, and this guy Paul Desjardins was he was a faster 1500 guy than me. He had been under 1530, and I think he was pretty cocky. I think he thought he had it all sewn up. And but we started the race, and he took it out hard, really hard. And I remember thinking, I can't maintain this, but I don't want to let him go. And so I just focused on being as efficient as I could, but I matched him stroke for stroke. And probably after about 8 or 9 kilometers, he really dropped off the pace. And I started opening up this big lead. And I got to the halfway mark, and I thought, great, I've got this big lead. All I have to do is maintain it. But then, the proverbial piano fell on me at probably around 15 kilometers. And I mean, I had a pretty big lead, but I didn't know what was going to happen because I had hit the wall really. And I was just hanging on, trying to finish this race. And I really struggled to the very end to complete it. But I did. I beat the field, and I became Canada's first open water race national champion. And I felt it was a personal victory for me because I had beaten Paul, who I think most people expected to win that race. And it was the start of my open water career. And likewise, the winners on the women's side were both my teammates. It was Corinne Lidke and Kim Dyke. Kim Dyke was second. And so that was a good victory for us as a team because, we swept the top positions, the 3 of us.
All from Victoria.
All from Victoria.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. So 2 coaches that you have actually, like having read some of your biography and some of the content online and some of the video material online, you've mentioned 2 coaches, John and Ron.
Oh, yeah.
Played a critical role in both pool and open water swimming.
Yes. Yeah. So John was so key in my formative years. He was the guy that probably set the mold that formed me as a youth. And later years after my mom passed and I found myself in Victoria, I decided to stay in Victoria rather than move to Nanaimo where John was coaching. And it was a big decision to make because I had an extreme amount of loyalty to John and, recognized what he had done for me. But at the same time, the core group of swimmers in Victoria was a better training group for me. And the training, we had a 50-meter pool there, which I don't think we existed in Nanaimo at the time. And then I also had a girlfriend at the time who was very important to me. And so, I elected to stay in Victoria and train with Ron. Ron was pretty accomplished swimmer himself and an accomplished coach. He had put somebody on the Olympic team every year for many, many cycles. And, Ron was a pioneer in some ways because he embraced this idea of open water swimming. And I think a lot of people in the coaching community looked at it like a bit of a sideshow because it was so brand new. Brand new to formality within FINA. Of course, open water swimming has a long and rich tradition of perseverance and accomplishment in that, but and racing as well. races had gone on for decades before FINA embraced it. And anyway, Ron was, keen to bring us forward and train us and try to, put our best effort forward. And I don't think a lot of coaches would have invested the time that Ron did with myself and Corinne and Kim. A lot of swimmers at that time were gravitating to University of Calgary with another famous coach, Derek Snelling, and his program with, Mark Tewksbury and people before Mark and Curtis Meiden after that. Calgary's at altitude, so there's a built-in bonus to being in Calgary. But I wanted to stay in Victoria, and so Ron was a pioneer. He was pretty strict in the way that he wanted things to unfold. It had to be his way or the highway. And we locked horns a couple of times when I had to assert my feeling about an approach in terms of training. And I think in some ways earlier in my career, I was pretty passive. Like I did what I was told. And, coaches love swimmers who are like that.
Yeah.
Right? Easy to deal with, not prima donna, not having to put a whole bunch of extra effort into that. But at the same time, it was only later in my career that I had to assert myself in terms of a few instances where what I was doing I didn't think was in my best interest. And, Ron didn't like that. So, there was a little bit of conflict and tension at times. And
I remember you mentioning about not swimming in Kitsilano Beach.
Oh, yeah. So before the summer before the World Championships, I had developed some problems in my hip flexors. Just keeping the balance in these ultra long swims, and they were not healing up completely. I when I trained hard, I felt them, and I felt like some of the races that I had done in colder water had sort of made this problem worse.
Okay.
And Ron, we're training at Kitsilano Pool, which I don't know if people out there know about Kitsilano Pool, but it's a beautiful outdoor pool.
37 meters.
Yeah, right on English Bay.
English Bay.
And just a fantastic place to swim as a recreational swimmer, or if you're going to train. There are always tons of triathletes there. But we had this thing that we did a number of years where we would come take the ferry from Victoria over to Vancouver, go and train at this place on the Friday, Saturday, and the Sunday. And we put in like about 70 kilometers in total. We do one day where we did a 25K, and the next day we did 15 in the morning and 15 at night. And then another day we did like 50 in the morning and 10 at night. So all told, it was about 75 kilometers that we would do in the weekend. I mean, exhausting, like just incredible. And we went there again to do not that much training, but it was later on in the summer. And Ron said, well, I think you should go out and do some open water in English Bay. And English Bay, it's a tidal type of thing, and it's not especially warm. And I didn't want to go in the cold water. And so we really locked horns over this issue. And Ron was adamant that I do what he wanted. And, I'm at this point a pretty accomplished swimmer, and I'm an adult. I'm going to have my own, advocate for myself. And so I said, no, I'm not going in there. Yeah. And Ron's position was, you know what, Greg, I'll take all the blame. If it doesn't work out, I'll take all the blame. Thinking to myself, okay, who cares if you take the blame? I don't want to screw myself up for Worlds.
This is just before you going to Perth, right?
No, this is, so I went to Perth in 1991 for the World Championships. And that was really the 1990 championships, but they had it in January of 1991 because of the Southern Hemisphere summer, and Christmas and so forth. So the next World Championships was in 1994, and those were happening in Italy. So the most of the events were in Rome, and the swimming was being done in this place called Terracina on the coast, about an hour from Rome.
Okay.
So yeah, this is a sort of probably like 2 months before World Championships, and I just had to assert myself and say I'm not going to do that. So yeah, and I'm glad I did, because I think it was the right decision.
It worked out. Yeah.
It worked out. Yes.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. There's something that I realized was okay. Like through your university days, you just lost your mom, but having figured out time management,
Mm-hmm.
like prepping your meals, making sure that okay, get through a textbook if you had a break,
Yes.
things like that. How did you figure it out, and were you able to share any of that wisdom to your kids? Because the reason that I'm actually asking you that question is I would like to, hey, you could do this to my own kids. I can.
Yeah. Well, it was sort of trial and error, really, that I looked at my first probably 3 years at University of Victoria academically, and I said, well, whatever I'm doing is not working. The combination of swimming and probably the grief and affecting my sleep and so forth. And I think I just got a bit better in terms of studying habits and preparation and so forth. And I got really good at it when I did pharmacy school, because I realized, okay, this is like a fresh start, right? The trials and the tribulations of that other time, let's do it better this time. And I was pretty good at prioritizing my academics and managing to do both at the same time. In terms of my kids, I've really tried to impart that to them. My youngest, Josephine, is at University of Ottawa, and she's in the 4th year of health sciences. And I think she was pretty good about that. She didn't need a whole lot of input in terms of setting that up, but I did tell her this is the way I did it. And Josephine's always been involved in sport. Like before picking up swimming when she was 12, she did really intensive gymnastics. And that was another situation where she was just a little girl, but she was doing gymnastics and keeping up school at the same time. And she's lucky in that she really inherited the best of both my wife and myself, and somehow was successful in not getting some of the other things that are part of our personalities. And so I think that's helped her, I think, manage both pretty successfully. She's great at academics, and she does a great job in training for her team, and it is a great I think asset to her team in terms of her personality and her capacity to train hard with them. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah.
But I mean, kids don't you can lead the horse to water, but you cannot make them drink. And we can do our best, I think, as parents to show the way, but sometimes the horse doesn't want to drink. So I don't know what your experience has been, but that's been my experience.
I have failed as a parent. I'm still struggling parent. Okay.
Well, I think we do our best, but kids are always dealing with more stuff than we had on our plate, right? Yeah. I think in some sense.
In my case, sometimes, I mean, I look at issues at home and issues at work. I'm able to solve an issue at work easily, but the same issue at home, I fail miserably.
Yeah, I have that same contrast in my life too. I operated, I'm a pharmacist and I operated some pharmacies when I was younger. And, I had a business partner, and between the two of us, we set our procedures and our process. And it was great because everyone did what you asked them to do because you were the boss, and it worked well. And then if you have that same expectation about being at home and having everyone follow what you tell them to do, you're going to be disappointed in some sense, right?
Many a times, okay, like the way I respond to a situation at work and at home, I have a different response to the same situation at home, and I'm like, what was I thinking? Like, why was I a jackass here? I could have dealt this better.
Yeah.
But I have no control. Like, yeah, I don't know how to fix that. Yeah, so I'm still struggling there.
Yeah, I think we are probably like most parents when we have our successes and our failures, and we keep trying and put our best forward and learning from those mistakes too.
Yeah, I think emotions actually play like an added twist to everything that you do at home.
Yeah.
Because, okay, hey, it's your child. You want to do the best. You want to, right? Yeah. So, yeah. And Santa Fe.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you've been there 3 times? You raced there 3 times or 4 times?
4 times.
4 times.
Yeah.
So the first and second, I mean, you're a celebrity there, and you have one popular fan at least. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I met my wife at that race.
Okay.
I mentioned earlier that Ron was a bit of a pioneer.
Mm-hmm.
The previous year, I had done my first professional race,
Mm-hmm.
which was Memphrey Magog in Quebec. It was a race that started in Vermont, and we swam north through the entirety of this 42-kilometer lake, Lac Memphrey Magog, and ended in Magog. And I won that event. And then when we were there, we kind of heard about these other races in South America and Argentina. And we thought, oh, maybe we should look at going and doing those races too. And so we made preparations and got some tickets. We applied for the race and were accepted and got the tickets, went down there. And we were there like 3 days before the race and coping with the travel and everything. And we went to this reception in the little town where the race ended called Coronda. And Ron was, it was really kind of like his only second professional race. And so we were trying to feel out how it was going to be. This was a time that they were using rowers rather than having outboard engines on our boats that were accompanying us. And we knew that it was on this river and there was like tributaries, and part of the race you had to go upstream, but we didn't really quite understand it all. And so Ron was keen to have somebody to be able to translate and speak effectively to the guys who were rowing to make sure that the boat was, he was able to do his job for me. And so we asked around, and some of the race organizers approached some volunteers, and this volunteer came forward, and she said that she would act as our translator. And then a short time later, she said, I can't do it. I have a conflict that day of the race. But, my sister, Daniela was the young woman who was going to help us out. And then she said, you know what, I can't do it, but my sister, Raquel, she's keen to do it. So we met Raquel, and Raquel was this fluent in Spanish and English. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I was hit by a thunderbolt. She was so beautiful when I first met her. And she's beautiful now. But I'm thinking back to the first time that I met her, I was struck by a thunderbolt. And so, we agreed to, she agreed to help us out with the race. And the funny thing was, I mentioned earlier in our conversation about learning lessons and failures, and learning not to put out too much energy at the beginning of the race. That race, it started, And these guys are quite ingenious. They had a series of prizes within the race that if you're the first person to make it to this mark, you win a prize. That's quite a smaller prize. And the first prize was like a kilometer into the race. So whoever had the fastest first kilometer, and it was from the start of the race to this bridge that spanned the Rio Coronda. And Rio Paraná at that point. And it was $500, $500 US. Because at that time, Argentina had their currency pegged to the US dollar. So all the winnings were in US dollars. $500 seemed like a lot of money to me. And I thought, I'm fit, I'm young, I got lots of energy. And I felt that most of the guys in the race, they weren't as fast as me in the pool. So I said, I'm going to scoop this easy $500 up, and it's not going to cost me anything. So I got into this, head to head with Christoph Vondrach, who is this German swimmer. Christoph was as fast as me in the pool. And we're heading down towards the bridge, and it's just him and me. Everyone is back now like 20, 30 meters. And the sad thing for me was the more energy I put into the race and the more sunk cost that I had into that strategy made it harder to pull out. Even though at some point I realized I'm swimming way too hard, but I thought I put in so much energy, I have to finish it through. And for me, I was putting in all this energy into head to head with Christoph. But Christoph is over like 15 or 20 meters away from me, but parallel, actually more in the center of the river. So he's actually getting the benefit of the current more than I am. So he's, this is just something that didn't even occur to me in the moment to consider those types of variables, that variable in particular. So he beat me, but he did it with much less effort.
Okay.
And so, I actually swam the whole race convinced that I had won that $500. And at some point, we got through a part of the race called El Vado, which it goes into this sort of tributary that's flowing from a littoral. It's like a plain that water forms these channels and enters into the race, or enters into the main river. But when we go up towards this plain, you're going against the current, and it's very taxing. And again, because of my inexperience, I'm not really realizing how fundamentally and deathly important it was to hug the shoreline rather than be in the middle. So I think, Ron, figured it out partway through there, and he said, make sure you're on the closest to the bank. And as we're swimming close to the bank, it's quite shallow. And then these little parasitic fish were coming up underneath me and trying to attach themselves to my, to the part of my chest that's, of course, in the water. And every swimmer is dealing with this. So I've developed this stroke where, I'm quite close to my body, but I'm flicking off these fish that are trying to attach themselves to me. Didn't know that they were there. Nobody warned me. So it's a little bit concerning that these fish are attacking. You're feeling like these fish are attacking you. So we get through this time, and then I'm feeling, because of my conduct at the start of the race and this sort of unusual race experience, I'm feeling quite tired. I'm feeling drained. And Ron and I had worked out a nutrition plan with this rehydration fluid, which had some carbohydrate in it. But we also thought we're going to eat a banana. And I remember Ron was, looking through his binoculars, looking at things, and he gave the task to Raquel, the translator. And Raquel gave me the banana, and I ate the banana. And after I ate this banana, I felt much more energized I continued the race, and just the way the race progressed, the eventual winner, Diego Degano, who was this Argentine great swimmer, had won the race many times before. he outpaced me. And another Argentine, Diego Fleitas, was also ahead of me. And oh, sorry, not Fleitas, it was Wandrach.
Mm-hmm.
Was there, and those guys opened up the race, and I was fading a lot through the second half of that race because of my inexperience, and I'm just putting too much energy up in the front of the too much output in the front of the race. So that race ends, and I came third, and I won some money. And in truth, because it was my first time, I felt good about that race. Even though I had won the previous race that I was in, I given the totality of the experience and the new aspects of that particular race, I thought, well, okay, that was a good first effort, but I can do better.
Way to go, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so the third time you beat the crowd.
Yeah. The second time I went down there, similarly, I was in school so that year, and I really didn't want to take a lot of time off school, so I went down there just 2 or 3 days before the race. And that also was a mistake, because if you want to put your best effort forward in that kind of race, you have to acclimatize a little bit, right? I went from -10 to +40. Maybe not quite that hot, but that big temperature swing, it had a pretty profound effect on me each year. And also the hot sun. This was at a time when the ozone layer had opened up quite a bit. And I remember I was a pasty white fella with no sun protection, and I know I burned there like in 15 minutes. And so that the sun takes it out of you as well. And so the second time I was down there, the race, we think usually of a race, nice sunny day, but you deal with the wind and the rain of the day, or whatever, the wind and the waves and whatever other conditions. There's another example of being a little bit unprepared, in that I hadn't thought to look at the forecast to see what the forecast was. But this sort of tropical storm had happened overnight and was still going on the morning of the race. So it was a force 5 gale.
Oh my God. Okay.
It was incredible. I mean, the wind was amazing. I came out in the, like probably 6:30, and my plan was to go to the bakery, which I knew was going to be open, and buy some breakfast there, because I really love the fresh bakery stuff in Argentina. I came out of the hotel dressed in shorts and a t-shirt, and I had to go back inside because the temperature had dropped so much, to go get a parka. So you get to the start of the race, the wind is blowing, and I'm thinking, well, they're going to cancel this race. They're not going to run it like this. But they did run it like that. And I started the race. I had learned from my previous experience, don't worry about the prizes. Keep your eye on the main prize. I started this race, and we ended up, I felt good, and I put a lot of pressure in probably the first third of the race, and a little bit more in that half, because I felt great, and I was opening up this huge lead. And Ron said, you got 900 meters on the field. 900 meters in a race is just like, that's such a huge advantage, a huge lead, that how can you blow that? But again, I blew it, and I hit the wall too early. And slowly, Diego and Christoph, they wound me up again, and they just like a sad fish that's been played out. They just reeled me in. And another problem was, again, I was swimming too close to the shoreline. I wasn't in the middle where the current was fastest. So when they caught me fast, and they just went right through me. And I was happy that I managed to finish the race in third again. But that year, I really felt that I had blown it. And that was also the super final for the World Series of professional races. And if I had won that or potentially came second, I could have won it overall, but I didn't. And there was a big financial prize that I was hoping to get, but I didn't. And so when I went down there the third year, I was really keen to win that year. And I made my preparation such that I went down there a week in advance, and I just did everything correct. And I paced myself. I didn't allow, anyone to get too far ahead of me. I didn't, this was an event that year where Chad Hunteby, who you mentioned earlier, who was a world champion in 1991, he took it out fast. And he was like 500 meters ahead of the field. But even though he was way ahead of me, I knew he was going to crash, because that's what had happened to me. And I knew my pace was good, and I knew I was going to catch him. And indeed, he hit the wall too, and the entire field caught him. And that was one of the first times that I employed this tactic of dropping the hammer. So, I paced myself. I got to within about 2 hours of the end of the race. And because of all these workouts these 2-hour workouts that I had done with the 9K, and really putting my entire effort into the 9K and these workouts, I knew how to apportion my reserves, and I knew how to get the best out of my last 2 hours of the swim. And I knew the other swimmers were going to be hurting, because you get into a race, no matter what, at that point everybody's hurting. But I thought, now is the time that I'm gonna break them. And I just picked up my pace for a bit and slowly was able to pull away from those guys. And then again, I just apportioned my energy, and I was really successful in finishing the race strong. And so that was the first time that I had won that race. And for me, it was a great victory, given the previous experiences, and the fact that I felt that Diego and the other Argentine swimmers, they had a huge advantage in terms of knowing the river and having the crowds behind them. And I felt really good about besting him in that race and the rest of the field. Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah. Is that the year that you also won Raquel's heart?
It was. So we had the previous year, the second time that I was down there, we had both had respective boyfriends and girlfriends, but Raquel's brother, Carlos, had invited me to their family home for dinner, and which I accepted. And so I went there, and I met Raquel there, and the rest of her family and her mom and dad, and I had a really enjoyable evening with Raquel's family. But we both had our boyfriend and girlfriend, and there was I think there was a connection there, but there was not anything that was romantic. And then the next year, when I went down the third year, I was single, she was single, and we really romantically connected during that time. And so we were, Raquel had said later, I want to come to Seattle, and I'm planning to go there to study English. And I said to myself, and later I said to her, well, Seattle, why go to Seattle? Come to Vancouver. Come to Vancouver and study English here in Vancouver. So Raquel did. And then she stayed with me, and subsequently we went to back to Victoria after the school year was done for me to train. And then before she went back to Argentina at the end of her visa, I proposed to her. And lucky for me, she said yes.
Beautiful,
yeah. There was that third year, Raquel's family had invited all the swimmers from Victoria and our coaches to their house for dinner.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Oh, it was, it was so much warmth, so much hospitality,
Mhm.
and they had really thrown out the red carpet, and we just had such a lovely evening. And her family was so generous and so lovely, and it really, I knew that, the relationship with whoever you're going to marry is really important, but another consideration is that is the family. And
Mhm.
they've been always beautiful and supportive in-laws. And I think her mom is probably one of my favorite people on earth. She's a beautiful human being. And
Mhm.
uh, so it's I have obviously a very strong connection to that race and to those communities.
Beautiful. Yeah. Uh, I'm going to jump into your professional life. So, how did you get into starting your business? How was it? And I think once in 2012 or 13, when I met you, you were just selling your business, if that is correct. Is that
Yeah,
13?
that is correct.
Right?
We're
Yeah.
looking for somebody to buy our businesses, and
Mhm.
I had started off my career in pharmacy working in acute care hospitals,
Mhm.
and in a 1-year hospital residency following school. And I think at that time, um, there was a relative lack of pharmacists. So, in response, the wages in retail or community pharmacy, as it's also called, they really started to outpace um, the salaries of people working in hospitals.
Mhm.
And I was a young dad with a young family, and so I really felt I enjoyed my job in hospital pharmacy, but I felt like I can't continue to not take advantage of this big difference in pay. And so I started working in community pharmacy, and I did
Mhm.
that for a few years. Raquel and I made the decision to move from Victoria for me, back to Cambridge in order to be a little bit closer to my dad and my family. My dad was, aging, and I wanted to be a little bit closer that way. And I worked for a corporation, and putting my best foot forward. But after a year or so, I realized that, you know, if I'm going to put my best foot forward in the long term, shouldn't that, although all my hard work and professionalism, shouldn't that benefit accrue to me rather than the corporation? And so I had met this fella, Ayman Labib, who worked in Cambridge, but occasionally would come to Guelph where I was working and work as a relief pharmacist. And
Okay.
so we were just chatting one day as we were working, and we kind of hit it off together, and we were both interested in, um, having our own business. And I think we both recognized that a partnership was really helpful in a pharmacy situation because, you know, if you want to be open 7 days a week and have extended hours, you can't do that by yourself. And having a partnership sort of is helpful in terms of uh,
Mhm.
being able to provide services and good hours to make ultimately your pharmacy successful. We ended up buying a pharmacy together in Elmira, Ontario.
Mhm.
Subsequently, we opened a pharmacy from scratch in Cambridge, and later we opened a second pharmacy in Cambridge. And then after a number of years, um, the pharmacy business aspect of things had really gone through a lot of changes in Ontario, having to do with the way that the province compensated pharmacists and the prices that they paid for medications. And it was a time that a lot of reform needed to happen because the way that it was being conducted was not in the best interests of Ontarians. And But part of that was, the Minister of Health at that time, he painted all pharmacies with a broad stroke of not giving good value. And I was really concerned about my businesses because I had a huge mortgage on my business. I had, remortgaged my house in order to help pay for it. And it was a very stressful time. And as a result of those reforms, the values of pharmacies really plummeted. And when those values came up a few years later, I felt like, okay, this might be a good time to exit the business at this point. My business partner agreed, and so we sold our businesses. And then I migrated back to working in acute care hospitals, and that's where I am now.
I don't know if there's any relationship here. I know you spent a lot of time in the pool, like putting diligent, disciplined work. How did any of that help you get through the tricky world of business? Because it's not an easy place to, life and business is not easy. So anything that you can relate to, or anything that you can, any wisdom or any skills that you picked up from the pool that you could, that help you get through the turbulent times?
Yeah, we talked about earlier about resilience. And I think, people who work in business, there's, successes and failures and hard times, and having a resilient mindset will help you get through those hard times for sure. I think, some of the discipline that comes from swimming, and in particular open water swimming, that's helpful in business too. Certainly in my practice, and being able to, put in a full days of work on your feet, putting your best foot forward in order to serve people. That requires a certain amount of discipline in order to do that consistently, and do it in a manner that benefits your clients and your patients. And I think I certainly brought some of that discipline from my swimming background to my work background, and able to, day in and day out, do that. I think, work ethic is another thing that, if you're a swimmer and you're used to getting up in the morning and going back and doing a second workout at night and coping with all the other things, you have a pretty good work ethic, and that translates directly in terms of your whatever profession you're in, right? If you work hard, there's this old adage, work smarter, not harder. But if you work smarter and you work hard, then that those benefits do accrue to you eventually.
Beautiful. Focus and stamina.
Yeah.
Focus and stamina that we never learn in school.
That's right. A lot of people don't get that in school, for sure. Unless they get the school of hard knocks in an open water swim.
And then you also went back to school to get your doctoral degree.
That's right. Yeah.
How was that?
That was a mixed experience for me. I really felt like when I was younger, it's something I wanted to do. I wanted to, achieve a high standard in terms of professionalism and knowledge, and then apply that in my day-to-day work. And life and finances sort of get in the way of that when you're young and have a young family. And when I was older, I thought, okay, well, what's stopping you? And it really came down to you better do it now or never, because I think by that time I was in my late 40s. And so I went back to school as a 49-year-old, and it was a 4-year part-time program from the University of Toronto. And a lot of sort of continuing education gets done by pharmacists along the way in their careers, year in and year out. And I think I had been a little bit deficient in some of those. So by going back to school, it caught me up on a lot of things that I probably should have known anyway. Part of that process was a experiential component. About a quarter of the time was meant to be experience based, and because I sort of had practiced pharmacy at a pretty high level in acute care hospitals, and I'd run my own businesses, and I didn't really benefit from being asked to go and work for 5-week rotation in a retail pharmacy. Like, that didn't benefit me. It certainly benefited the pharmacies that I worked in, and so that aspect of it was a little bit disappointing. But I had some really great instructors, and some of them really imparted some great knowledge that I was able to incorporate into my work and be more effective. So overall, I think I'm glad I did it. A little bit disappointed in some aspects of it. So I think that's par for the course in life, right? So
Awesome. Yeah. So, Greg, we've been chatting for the past 90 minutes. I think we have another 3 or 4 hours of content that we can talk. But
you need to do a program where somebody interviews you and you share what it's like to swim in the the almost Antarctic conditions.
No. This is my achievement is nothing compared to what you've done, and reading about your friend and having spoken to you, I think we've met like 4 or 5 times. Every time it has been like, wow.
That's very kind of you to say that, but I mean, I think you're a wonderful representative of the International Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame, and they're lucky to have you, somebody who's so personable and works hard on their behalf, and I think has a very broad perspective on open water swimming. And every time I see you, Madhu, it brightens up my day.
Likewise, I am only reflecting everything that I'm seeing. Okay. But here is something that I want to end this conversation on. I'm actually quoting your friend: work like a captain, play like a pirate.
Yeah.
And then remember to take care of your goodness.
Yeah.
That was very beautifully said, and it's very meaningful. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And
I'm gonna work on that.
I'm always a work in progress to work on that, but I do keep it in the forefront. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And Greg, thanks for your time. I think we should meet for a cup of coffee or breakfast one of these days.
That would be great, Madhu. I would really enjoy that.
Yeah, let's do that. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Cheers.
Well, thanks very much for interviewing me, or at least having this conversation. I think it's so much of open water swimming was done before the internet age. I'm really grateful that you give me a platform to share my experiences, and thank you.
I think we'll have another session, like maybe in the next 6 months, and get into like I need to do some more research on some of your swims, and maybe we can deep dive into a couple of swims if you are okay for that.
Yeah, sure.
Is that okay? Yeah.
I'll share with you all my failures and
another thing that I noticed from everything that you have spoken about is like you always focused on your failures. You embraced failures, I think, which actually has put in such a fantastic resume for you. That's something that I noticed as well.
Yeah, I think it's so true that I forget, some celebrity made that quote that you don't learn from your successes, you learn from your failures, and it's so true.
That is so true.
And I certainly know that firsthand. And I mean, they're so numerous that and they're so hard impressed on me because of the outcomes that, it's hard to forget them. But I mean, that's part of learning, and that's what makes them such great teaching tools.
Yes. Yeah. Awesome, Greg. Always a pleasure. And
Same here, McGee.
yeah, let's get coffee or breakfast. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, very good.
Cheers.
Thanks again.
Bye.
Bye-bye.